Could Myles Turner be a sneaky trade candidate for a lot of teams around the NBA, as centers reportedly are a hot commodity? We'll talk a little bit about that, plus updates to the Bradley Beal, Jimmy Butler fiasco that keeps going around, all that and more on today's NBA Central.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. Y'all, first off, I've been sick as hell like the last 3 or 4 days, so I apologize that there's been no content coming out on this channel over that time period. We're going to be a lot better here as we head towards the rest of the trade deadline, but I've been down and I've been out and I was on death's door, but we're back now. And so this one comes from Buha in regards to Javon Buha from The Athletic, and he says this: I've heard from a league source that Indiana might kind of sneakily be open to trading Myles Turner. Now, he also went on, he is a Los Angeles Lakers beat reporter, right? And he did give some information based on the Los Angeles Lakers and their potential pursuit about it. And he went on to add this: he's about to be an unrestricted free agent. He's going to want $30+ million. And I've heard Indiana is not sure if they want to give him that much. So if they don't, then from an asset management standpoint, it makes sense to trade him. And that's what we're going to see with a lot, right? Is that with Myles Turner and him becoming a free agent here soon, is he a player that the Indiana Pacers would be looking to move on from the trade deadline? And this is what I say about every team. You're gonna find this to be a very common and consistent thing for me. If a team knows in their heart of hearts a player is not part of their future, you should fuck the optics. You should be looking to move on and gain some type of assets back for that player. And I think that's just a smart allocation of assets in the modern NBA, especially at a time where they're going to want teams are going to be avoidance of the second tax apron. Bird rights are going to be even more coveted by teams. I think signing trades are going to be things that are kind of more that you see more, sooner and stuff like that. I think that in the foreseeable future, that's the word I was looking for. In the foreseeable future, you see signing trades even more of a big part of off-season plans than before, so you can gain some type of assets back, even if you're going to lose a player that you know that you don't want to keep. But Myles Turner is still a very productive player, averaging 15 points per game this season, which is less than he did last season. He's also shooting 47.9% from the field, which is about 6% less than what he shot last year. He's shooting the ball better from three at 39.3%, and he's taking 1 3-pointer more per game and hitting that at a better rate than what he did last season. The 6.8 rebounds is right along with that, still averaging 2 blocks per game and almost a steal per game. Myles Turner is still a very productive player. And while he is 28 years old, he'll be 29 next season. Turns 29 in March. He'll be 29 here in a couple of months, but the majority of next season, he'll be 29. There's a lot to go in to why Myles Turner could make sense for teams that want to kind of make this move for Myles Turner. Now, for the Indiana Pacers standpoint, you look at them. Their season's starting to turn around, right? Like, especially for where it was at the beginning of the season where they were just a disappointment, and a lot of people were asking what the hell. They've worked themselves back up to being 5th team in the Eastern Conference. So you do not want to lose Myles Turner for nothing at all if you can avoid it. Now, the question that the Pacers have to ask themselves here is that in a Myles Turner trade, if you do trade him at this year's trade deadline, do you get anything back that helps your team stay afloat, or do you take a little bit of a step back? His $19.9 million is a fairly movable contract. I think that that's not a bad contract at all. I mean, you look for a player that's kind of more disappointing right now in the Bulls, Patrick Williams making only $1.8 million less than Myles Turner. You can clearly see, like, what's going on there, right? So, he signed his contract in a different era, different CBA, and so him wanting $30 million, that's kind of understandable, right? I think the level of player that he is, we're going to see kind of contracts more common of that, and so it makes some sense there. And so I think when the Pacers, they're just looking at an asset management standpoint if they do look to move on from Myles Turner, or maybe they feel like they can convince him to stay, take a little bit less, or whatever else it is if they do end up holding on to him. But Myles Turner could help a lot of teams in the NBA, especially when you hear about the number of teams that are looking for centers, right? You look at the Los Angeles Lakers, and while Myles Turner isn't some lockdown defender, he still is a pretty damn good defender. And if you compare Myles Turner on that front line with the Anthony Davis, I tell you what, now, it's not like it's going to be just easy for them to get there, Rui Hachimura gets you a lot of the way there at $17 million contract, and I would not be mad at that at all. So I would say look out for some of these teams, especially with the way that he's shooting the three ball as well this year. Maybe even the Golden State Warriors, who reportedly want a center that you can that's a shooting threat. I think Myles Turner is way better defensively than Nikola Vucevic, for example, another center that they were rumored to be interested in. It could make some sense for these teams to take a bite and to look at what Myles Turner could bring. And so let me know what you guys think down below. And hearing that Myles Turner could be somebody that's available at the trade deadline, who do you think could bite on it? What team do you think he can help the most? Let me know all that down below. Now, with that said, I try my best. As most people will know that follow this show consistently, I try my damnedest to not talk about the Chicago Bulls on this show. I have a whole entire Chicago Bulls show, which I really focus that talk on. I'm a huge Bulls fan. As you can see the Bulls head behind me, I'm a Chicago sports fan. So I try to separate this channel for the objective side of it to not talk about the Bulls here a lot. And I'm not even going to talk about the Bulls per se a lot in this next segment, but more so just how things are starting to shape up, right? So apparently that the Bulls have been in discussions in the Jimmy Butler trade with Bradley Beal for something to come there, for them to be one of the teams on the outskirts of happening on that deal, right? And this came from Brian Windhorst, where he said this: "We're dancing around this because I've been burned on aggregation. But the bottom line is that the Bulls and the Suns have talked, and the concept of Bradley Beal ending up in Chicago has been discussed. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying it's close or whatever. Obviously, Bill has a no trade clause." This has been one of the biggest things talked about in the basketball community right now, is that if Jimmy Butler is to make his and find his way to the Phoenix Suns, if the Miami Heat are trying to get a deal done to get that done, it's going to have to come with Bradley Beal, A, waiving his no trade clause, and B, more than likely another team having to be included because reportedly the Heat don't want Bradley Beal. So for that to happen, you have to get a third team. For that also happening means that Bradley Beal has to waive his no trade clause to go to that team. And there's been 4-team trades. There's been 5-team trades that have been rumored around, and the one that includes the Bulls is basically the Bulls and the Milwaukee Bucks, where Zach LaVine would end up on the Bucks. Bradley Beal would end up on the Chicago Bulls. Zach LaVine would end up on the Bucks. Bradley Beal would end up on the Chicago Bulls. Chris Middleton would end up on the Miami Heat. And then, of course, Jimmy Butler would end up on the Phoenix Suns. Now, there's a lot to get all that done. That would include 2 teams that are in the second tax apron that can't include 2 players in the deal, right? And so a trade involving 2 second tax apron teams would be crazy to see, right? And so while I get it that everybody's trying to figure out how this trade can go down, and I'm sure the teams are still trying to figure out how this trade can go down, but ultimately, it still comes down to, is Bradley Beal going to waive that no trade clause? And I still think that's why we have not seen a deal go down yet. I think that if Bradley Beal were to waive that no trade clause, we see a deal happen now, right? I think that you can find enough minutia and the rest of the pieces around for you to make that deal happen if Bradley Beal is going to waive that no trade clause. Now, this is just my own personal thoughts on this. Now, listen, I don't know what Bradley Beal could be holding out for. I don't know what the Suns could be holding out for. Maybe it comes down to Yusuf Nurkic finding a different way to move him first, and then you can try to move, make a move in something else. We don't know. Nurkic has already said he has no speaking relationship with their head coach, which is crazy to hear and see, right? But all this going on just leads it to be a situation where this is about to be a mess. And a lot of people have said it before, right? As far as this could end up being one of the bigger trades that we've ever seen in NBA history, mainly because of all the other teams that could be involved, all the money that's going to be involved in moving around, all the assets and everything that when it's all said and done, the players, the teams, and the assets could combine to one of the largest trades that we've ever seen happen in the NBA. And here's the thing when it gets done to that, this has been a mess. And while Jimmy Butler is slated to make his return today, I do think that this is even going to be more of a mess. I just don't know. If the Miami Heat are really prepared for how crazy Jimmy Butler is going to be willing to make this, if it means him getting his way. And that's just what it comes down to with Jimmy Butler. He is somebody who's not ashamed. He's not afraid to do whatever it takes if it means him getting what his desired outcome is, right? And so we'll see what happens there. But whether the Bulls or any other team are involved in anything else and how it shakes out, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But I do think this, right, is that if Jimmy Butler does end up being moved, which depending on how you look at it, I still personally have it as it's a possibility. I'm not necessarily looking at it as it's going to be a foregone thing. I do think there's a real world scenario in here in which, Jimmy Butler is still on the Miami Heat at the end of the season. I don't know how optimal that is, but I do think that that's a possibility. We'll end up seeing what comes out of all of this, man. But overall, I know that Jimmy's ready to make this a mess. Bradley Beal has a lot of control. There's a lot of player control in these deals, and we'll see if that ends up working out best for the teams or worse for the teams. But you guys can let me know how you feel about it down below. Last topic that we have that we're going to talk about before we get out of here is that reportedly the Celtics and the Knicks are teams that are hovering around to see if the Pelicans are going to open up their roster to trade and making a bunch of deals. Reportedly that Javonte Green is a player that has interest. This via Brett Siegel that a lot of teams have interest in. Right, when you look at it as well, that his contract isn't much. He's a really good role player. As somebody who's also been on my Chicago Bulls before, you know that Javonte Green is a player that just fits into his role. It makes sense for the Celtics as well, as the Celtics were the player that we got Javonte Green from, that the Chicago Bulls got. And Jason Tatum has talked about before how much it hurt to lose Javonte Green, how much of friends that him and Javonte Green were to become. And so if you're a team that's looking for a shot in the arm leading into the playoffs, Javonte Green could be that. While he's only averaging 6 points per game, you look at the effort that Javonte Green brings on both sides of the ball. He has that dog mentality, and he's a player that just understands his role and how to play off other players and fit in. No matter what role you throw at Javonte Green, where he's played wing, he's played shooting guard, small forward, power forward, right? Even guarded centers. Javonte Green is the type of player with his energy and execution. He can make a lot of sense for a lot of teams. So to hear that the Knicks and the Celtics are two teams that could very well be interested in a player like Javonte Green if the Pelicans do make him available, I'm not really surprised by that at all. Now, the Pelicans sit in a place where it's funny how things change, right? We started this off, we're hearing that most of the roster is available, then even Zion Williamson, and now no moves has happened, not even for Brandon Ingram, a player that I think a lot of people around the league thought would be moved by now. And if it ends up that they just move a player like Javonte Green at the trade deadline, I think that's going to surprise some people. But like I said, don't overlook, because of him not being a household name or him not being a player that averaged double-digit points, don't overlook the impact that a player like Javonte Green has had on the teams that he's been on. Javonte Green is a dog. And especially when you look at the teams like the New York Knicks and the Boston Celtics, two teams that already have their stars, they have their core established. If you can bring in a player like a Javonte Green, that 6'5" wing that understands his role, I mean, he can play a huge impact for those for those teams. So again, and that's all within what you expect for him being in the role that he plays in. So an interesting name to watch at the trade deadline as well. But let me know what you guys think on all that down below. As always, make sure you're following the show at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related. And I'll see you guys the next time I feel like making a video, as long as I don't get sick, probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.